Welcome everyone. My name is Mayor Hugh Cothran. I am the mayor of this awesome city. This is a wonderful day, January 27th, 1872, as we celebrate our very own water tower. So it's great to see everyone here today. A shout out to the Rome High Band. And this is meant to be fun. So I'm glad you're here, and I'd like to introduce a special guest, Mr. James Noble. James.
Thank you, Mayor. Good morning, my fellow Romans. As he said, my name is James Noble. I wrote a little speech here to dedicate this ceremonial day for our waterworks, which you fine Romans know that this is very wonderful and stupendous tank that we have behind here is going to provide water for our city and our much needed volunteer fire department that we have. I stand here with great pride, and I'm also very humbled that my family's firm, the Noble Brothers, was chosen to provide this city's celebrated volunteer fire department with the water it needs for its stupendous new steam pumpers. I might add, if you have not seen the new steam pumpers that is housed at Rainbow and Mountain City, please go by and check them out. Beautiful, fine works of art that we have now in this great city. I would also like to give recognition to Mr. Genius George. He has been hired to oversee the operations and maintenance of our splendid waterworks and our pump station, which is located directly down the road here. I spoke with him earlier, and he sends his regrets that he was not able to attend this wonderful celebration due to a prior engagement. It is also with great joy for us to announce the same water will be available to homes and businesses by request at a small fee. It is my hope that you, sir, and the rest of you fine gentlemen out here will buy into this splendid idea that we have now built here in Rome. For your wives will no longer have to draw water from the wells. Mayor Cochran, I thank you for this opportunity. Thank you, fine Romans.
It's my understanding if you're not holding your drinking glass very tight, the pressure will just knock it right out of your hand. So again, Mr. James Noble and the Noble family. And now our Honorable Doug Walker. Doug?
At great risk, I try to bring you some of the history of our clock tower and waterworks. We'll take you back to the 1860s, immediately following the war. We were in Reconstruction. The city of Rome was on the verge of growth, much as we are today. The year was 1868. The Rainbow Fire Company was formed. It was housed in 1869 in the building just down the street where Jamwich was located. The following year, Mountain City Fire Department was formed, shared the building, and then later in 1869, the Citizens Hook and Ladder Department was formed. The Rainbow and Mountain City each had steam pumpers pulled by horses. The Hook and Ladder, of course, also had a horse-drawn unit as well at the time. Back in those days, we had a number of fires, both in our Between the Rivers Historic District and on Broad Street. We're not sure exactly which fire prompted the city officials to determine that these pumpers just weren't getting the job done. They didn't have the pressure. And so a committee was created and went to Bowling Green, Kentucky. I believe one of the nobles was a part of that committee that went to Kentucky to look at a similar waterworks, and they came back with a very favorable report. This was originally created not for the water, if you will, that was provided to the citizens, so much at any rate, but primarily for fire suppression. However, our water department did ultimately grow out of this. So did our electrical department with the alarms that were put into the stations. Our city electrical department grew out of that. So an election was held. The city needed to float bonds to build this. Approximately $100,000 in bonds was what was earmarked. The original vote passed with 96 votes. There were, I think, 560 some registered voters in the city at the time. 96 people voted in favor of it the first time. Again, for some reason, and we're not exactly sure, a second vote was held. I think there was some concern about the number of voters in that first vote. Election problems are cyclical, aren't they? They're not going to go away. So a second vote was held, and this one was held over 2 days. And it passed by a wide margin with approximately 360 votes the second time to 140 folks who actually voted no. As Mr. Noble indicated, there were some people who had a problem with it. They had a problem with the pressure, the potential pressure, what they were told, the perceived pressure. They also had a problem with paying for water. They thought, we've got 3 lovely rivers. We've got wells. You're going to take water, pump it up here, and then pump it down and make us pay for this water? Surely not. 140 some people felt that way and voted no. But it passed, and it was constructed. Henry Smith was mayor when it started in 1871, and by the time we got to the dedication, Mayor Cothran had become the new mayor. I would tell you, Joe Smith told me city records don't go back past 1876. So we're not exactly sure what the final price tag was for this. We've seen cards through history that indicated a contract was for approximately $49,000 to build the waterworks itself. Well, the tank inside, and we encourage you, it's open. We encourage you to go inside when we're done here today. It's 26 feet in diameter, approximately 60 feet high, holds 250,000 gallons of water. As you can imagine, water being pumped out of a well, as Mr. Noble indicated, which is down here at the bottom of 4th Avenue and the Nashville, Chattanooga, and St. Louis railroad tracks. It was about a 60-foot deep well. And of course, after you draw this water and we got it into houses, a cup of water that sat there for any period of time had mud in the bottom of it. And so a number of years later, the city filter station was built over on Jackson Hill where it is today. And we made the switch. The last time water was actually in this tank, I believe it was drained in 1967. It was used as a backup water supply, backup for fire protection for many, many years. There was a fire that destroyed the clockworks. The clockworks were not part of the original tower. They came along not quite a year after the dedication ceremony, later in 1872. The clockworks, the clock came from the Howard Clock Company in Waltham, Massachusetts, the bell from the Manili Company in New York. It was damaged by fire in 1902. Strange enough, this was built for water protection. They still couldn't get water to the top of the tower, so they had to create a bucket brigade to go up the 107 steps that wind all the way to the top to douse that fire. Let's fast forward to the 1980s. Our Rome JCs, under partial leadership of a gentleman to my rear, raised approximately $80,000 in 1986 for a major restoration of the clock tower. And then not quite 10 years later, in 1995, the JCs again raised money for the development of the murals, the museum that you will find inside when you take that tour. It's been fixed up, repaired a number of times since then. We've made many improvements you see around the clock tower up here, around Bailey Park. Did any of you know that this was called Bailey Park? Named again for a commissioner that served in the early 19th century, who was one of the leaders of the effort to create more parks in the city of Rome. So that's our clock tower. I want to remind you that tonight at 5 o'clock we'll have an event at the Rome Area History Center where those of you who have made clock tower recreations, somebody's going to be awarded at that tonight. Those will all be on display through February 11th. And then throughout the rest of the year, we'll have events celebrating 150 years of this iconic clock tower, beginning April 1st with a stargazing event featuring some telescopes and whatnot. That'll be at 8:30. And again, we're going to hope for a clear, perhaps warmer night on April 1. The Saturday afternoon clock tower tours at noon on the first Saturday of each month will begin April 2nd. A clock tower lecture series will be held at the History Center beginning April 8th. And then there will be a major clock tower exhibit at the History Center, which is scheduled to open April 13th. With that, I turn it back over to Mayor Cothran.
Thank you, Doug. And we have a resolution to celebrate this historic day. Whereas the Rome Waterworks were originally dedicated 150 years ago today, on January 27, 1872, to celebrate the construction of the water tower and Rome's first pressurized water system, providing a better water source for Rome's volunteer fire departments and residents. Whereas the city will celebrate for a full year because Rome wasn't built in a day, nor was the clock tower. The clock tower portion of the structure was completed 9 months later on October of 1872, whereas the Rome History Center, the Historic Preservation Commission, and Georgia's Rome Office of Tourism have joined together to share the history of the Rome Clock Tower through events, tours, lectures, and exhibitions to help celebrate our history, as well as raise funds to help preserve our history so that we can continue to enjoy the Rome Clock Tower for generations to come. Whereas the year-long Rome Clock Tower, just a second, do you know what you call a 150-year-old clock? An old timer. That wasn't in the resolution. Whereas the year-long Rome Clock Tower celebrations will help recognize the importance of preserving our historic clock tower structure that is listed on the National Register of Historic Places, stands in the center of town on Clock Tower Hill, and is located on one of the 7 hills of Rome. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the city of Rome declares January 27th, that's today, 2022, as the official kickoff of the Rome Clock Tower 150th birthday celebration. Be it further resolved that the city of Rome encourages all citizens, city government officials, and employees to do everything possible to ensure that this day is recognized and celebrated to its full extent. And before I cut the ribbons, young folks, old folks, everybody come to our clock tower and we'll have a lot of fun. Leave your worries and troubles at the door and you'll live a life like you never had before. How about it? Now we're going to cut the ribbon. Are you ready? Yeah. 1, 2, 3.
Hello, my name is James Noble, as I was portraying here today. My name is actually Philip Little. I actually work for the fire department here in Rome. I was kind of asked to do, kind of talk about what I have on today. Everything that I have on is as close to period correct as I'm able to get today in 2022, trying to get back to the 1870s era. So what I have on is actually the clothing that most prominent men would have worn back then. This is kind of like a, I call it my Sunday or a city attire, town attire. What I would go to town in, may go to church or any kind of dignitary events that would dress up. As far as the style that I have, each person created their style to themselves. I did do a little bit of research on James Noble. Everything, the way that I portray James Noble is not 100%. You know, as way as Mr. Noble was, but I kind of put my twist to it just a little bit. As you see here, some guys would actually wear their pants tucked down into their boots because we didn't have paved roads. A lot of the roads were either, if they were paved, it would have been with cobblestone or brick, but most of the time it was mud. As far as when it would rain, it would turn to mud from the dirt roads and stuff. So to keep their clothes as clean as possible, they would actually tuck their boots in. I would have had a horse back then. Of course, you'd have spurs to be able to guide your horse as needed. On this, it was actually for a gentleman to be seen in town. They would always have at least either a jacket on or a vest. It was very kind of frowned upon for a gentleman to run around with just my undershirt on. They kind of get him back towards your undergarments. But I would at least have, if I took this off, I would walk around with my vest on. They're still portraying, you know, being properly dressed, being out of town. Of course, they all had their hat, different styles of the hat, how they wanted to do it. This is actually a wool overcoat. When we did today, as far as kind of going what I have on me and in my pockets, was the letter that I wrote. Tried to get as close as I could, you know, writing back around the style of error of what they might have wrote back then. This paper is as close as I can get to actually authentic paper. There is a retailer that I buy online whose paper that he sells is as close as we can get. There are a few reproduction items I have. Would have had a wallet. In here I have, you know, would have been my money. Of course, this is going to be reproduction money here. Sometimes I will bring real currency out with me. Just kind of depends on if I, you know, don't want to lose it or tear it up. You know, of course, a lot of those are treasured items because nobody makes them anymore. So you're going to have to be careful with them. Some men may or may not have had, you know, need to be able to write, take notes. This is a little journal here. If you needed to write, take notes, of course, you would have had a pen or a pencil. Of course, you do notice about these pencils, there was not an eraser on there. They did not have erasers back then. The cup I'm drinking out of is a copper cup. It's a reproduction item. Of course, found it, you know, online. You can order this stuff. My pocket watch is actually an 1873 timepiece. Back then, it was if it worked, you didn't change it up. So if it's not broke, why fix it, correct? This is 1873 watch. It does work. It is actually keeping time. It is actually wound with a key, and you would wind the clock right there. And if you needed to adjust the time to make sure your time was set, you would set the time there. Most gentlemen back then, in around the 1800s, they would have some kind of weapon on them, unless it was a city ordinance where guns were not allowed, then they would have knives. Most men still carried a pocket pistol. This is reproduction pocket pistol. This is resembling it's a 31 caliber. Notice this is cap and ball. They didn't have, getting real deep into actually how firearms were. They were still fired with cap and ball. Do have a boot knife here. In my pocket, you have a boot knife. And this knife here was actually made for me by a local gentleman. So like I'm talking about getting, in your pockets, may or may not have, a handkerchief. I'd have a tin here for matches, and that would be for, cigar if one wants to smoke cigars. That was very, I guess, the thing to do back then. Of course, we do know nowadays that, smoking is not really good for you. But you just always have a pocket knife, always carry the knife with you. And this is just a small bone handle pocket knife, resemblance of the era of that time. In this pocket, I do have actual coin money. It was more prevalent to have coin money back then. And in here, I have a couple of silver pieces and some actual pennies that date back to around that time era, which we know nowadays is very rare to usually use, I guess, coin currency. But when I, do this, I try to immerse myself as close as I can to, how they were back then in that time period. Try to portray to people as close as we can get to, or someone of that character of the time. But I think that's about it. Thanks.
Thank you.